The red dust of Mars swirled around Jack Miller's boots as he walked across the training yard. 3 years had passed since humans made first contact with the Galactic Confederation, and still he found himself amazed by the sight of aliens going about their daily business. 12 species working together at this joint military base, and humans were the newest kids on the block. Jack checked his watch. He was early for the morning briefing, as usual. Military habits die hard, even when serving in the newly formed Human-Alien Security Forces. Human Jack, your breathing is too loud. I can hear you from 20 meters away. Jack turned to see Zaralith approaching. The Vexillian female stood a head shorter than him, her silvery skin reflecting the morning sunlight. 3 large eyes, 2 where humans had eyes and a third in the center of her forehead, blinked at different times as she studied him. "Good morning to you too, Lily," Jack replied with a smile. Zaralith's faceplates shifted in what Jack had learned was annoyance. "I have told you not to use that human name for me. And I've told you that Zaralith is hard for human tongues. Lily is easier," Jack shrugged. "Besides, most Confederation species take shorter names when working with humans." She made a clicking sound with her mouth. "Most species are too kind to your limitations." Jack had grown used to Lily's attitude. The Vexillians were famous for their pride, especially when it came to their natural abilities. Their enhanced vision and steady bodies made them the best marksmen in the Confederation. And they never let anyone forget it. "We're heading to the same briefing, right?" Jack asked, changing the subject. "Something about new training exercises." Lily fell into step beside him. "Yes, though I don't understand why humans are included in advanced marksmanship training. Your species lacks the physical requirements for true precision." Jack bit his tongue. Before joining the Confederation forces, he had been one of Earth's top military snipers, with confirmed kills at distances that had earned him medals and a classified file. But humans were still proving themselves to their new allies, and Vexillians were particularly hard to impress. The briefing room was already filling with various species. The low-gravity section contained the bulky Draconians, whose heavy bodies needed the assistance. Near the front sat 3 Arachni, their 8 limbs neatly folded. Jack nodded to Amy Rodriguez, the only other human in the room, who saved him a seat. "Lily giving you a hard time again?" Amy whispered as Jack sat down. "The usual," he replied. "Humans are too noisy, too clumsy, too everything." Commander Vex, a tall blue-skinned Ulgorian, called the room to attention. His translator device converted his native sounds into standard Confederation language. "The Confederation Council has approved joint combat exercises between all member species," the commander announced. "These exercises will test various skills, including close combat, strategy, and marksmanship." At the word marksmanship, Lily and the other Vexillians in the room straightened with pride. "Each base will select representatives to compete against other bases," Commander Vex continued. "The exercises begin in 3 weeks. I expect all of you to demonstrate your best skills." When the briefing ended, Lily turned to Jack with what he recognized as her version of a smile, a slight parting of faceplates to reveal the smooth skin beneath. "I look forward to showing you how real snipers perform, Human Jack," she said. "Perhaps you will learn something by watching me." Jack kept his expression neutral. "Perhaps we'll all learn something new, Lily." As they left the briefing room, Jack felt a familiar fire ignite in his chest, the kind of fire that had pushed him through Special Forces training back on Earth. Humans might be the newcomers in space, might lack the natural advantages of other species, but they had something that continuously surprised their alien allies: the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. "Hey, Miller." Amy called from behind him. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Jack grinned. Time to show the Confederation what humans can do. Amy's answering smile was fierce. "Exactly." Little did Lily know, Jack Miller was about to change her understanding of what was possible, one impossible shot at a time. The next morning, Jack found himself at the shooting range before dawn. Mars' twin moons still hung in the pink sky, as he set up his rifle. The familiar weight of the weapon in his hands was comforting, like greeting an old friend. "Practicing already, human Jack. It will not help." Jack didn't need to turn around to know it was Lily. No other species moved so quietly. "Just keeping my skills sharp," he replied, looking through his scope at the target 200 meters away. A simple shot by any standard. Lily moved beside him, her three eyes all focused on the target. For humans, that distance must seem challenging. Jack fired. The bullet hit dead center. "Not particularly," he said, reloading. Lily made that clicking sound again. "A child's distance. Watch." She pulled out her own weapon, a sleek Vexillian rifle that seemed to be part of her arm when she held it. Without seeming to aim, she fired 3 rapid shots at a target twice as far as Jack's. All 3 hit within millimeters of each other. "Impressive," Jack admitted. "This is why Vexillians are chosen as elite snipers in the Confederation forces," Lily said. "Our third eye judges distance perfectly. And we do not have your human breathing problems or heartbeats that throw off aim." More soldiers began arriving at the range. Amy Rodriguez spotted Jack and walked over, carrying her own rifle. "Ready for the selection trials tomorrow?" she asked. "Selection trials?" Jack looked at her, confused. "You didn't check your messages. Commander Vex sent the details last night. Each species will hold trials to choose representatives for the competition." Lily's faceplates shifted into what Jack now recognized as her version of a smirk. "Will humans even participate in the marksmanship event? Perhaps you should focus on events better suited to your abilities." Amy crossed her arms. "Like what?" "Endurance, perhaps. I hear humans are surprisingly good at continuing despite failure." Lily's tone made it clear this wasn't entirely a compliment. Before Jack could respond, Commander Vex's voice boomed over the range's speaker system. "Attention all personnel. Report to the main field for competition announcements." The main field was the largest open space on the base, used for ceremonies and large-scale exercises. All 12 species gathered, naturally grouping with their own kind. The humans, being the smallest group on base, formed a tight cluster of 20 soldiers. Commander Vex stood on a raised platform. "The Confederation High Command has finalized the competition events. There will be 7 categories: close combat, tactical planning, piloting, tech integration, environmental survival, team coordination, and marksmanship." At the word marksmanship, Jack felt Lily's three-eyed gaze on him from across the field. Each species must select their best representatives for each category by the end of the week, the commander continued. The marksmanship event will test abilities at extreme ranges under various planetary conditions. After the announcement, as the crowd dispersed, Lily approached Jack again. Several other Vexillians followed her, all looking at the humans with what seemed like amusement. "Your commander should save you the embarrassment, and not send humans to the marksmanship event," one of the male Vexillians said. Jack kept his face neutral. "I think we'll let our skills decide that." Lily tilted her head. "Are you suggesting you might represent humans, Jack Miller? Perhaps you don't understand the level of skill required." "I understand perfectly," Jack said quietly. Amy stepped forward. Jack was one of Earth's top military snipers before joining the Confederation forces. The Vexillians all made the clicking sound at once, which Jack had learned was their version of laughter. "Earth skills mean nothing here," Lily said. "Your planet's standards are provincial. The competition will include shots at distances your kind considers impossible." Jack smiled slightly. "Impossible is just another day at the office for humans." Lily's third eye narrowed. "We shall see, human Jack. We shall see." As the Vexillians walked away, Amy nudged Jack with her elbow. "You know they're right about the distances. Vexillians can see and shoot farther than any human ever has." Jack watched Lily's retreating form. "Maybe. But they don't know what humans can do when someone tells us something's impossible." "You're thinking of volunteering for the trials, aren't you?" Amy asked. Jack nodded. a plan already forming in his mind. Time to show Lily and her friends what a human with a rifle can really do. The human trials for the marksmanship competition took place 3 days later. Jack arrived early, his custom rifle cleaned and ready. The weapon was a mix of Earth and Confederation technology, heavier than standard issue, but perfectly balanced for his hands. Figured you'd be here first, Amy said as she walked up behind him. She carried a spotter's kit rather than a rifle. I'm not competing. Thought I'd spot for you instead. Jack nodded gratefully. A good spotter was as important as a good sniper. Captain Steve Howard, the human commander, addressed the 12 soldiers who had shown up. The marksmanship trials will test accuracy at increasing distances. Top score represents humanity. As the trials began, Jack watched his fellow humans carefully. Most were good shots, but none had his background. Before joining the Confederation forces, Jack had been part of Earth's Special Forces, with over 80 confirmed kills at distances that most considered beyond human capability. When his turn came, Jack felt a familiar calm settle over him. He lay down, positioned his rifle, and took slow, measured breaths. The first target was simple, 500 meters. The second, at 800 meters, barely challenged him. By the third target at 1,200 meters, half the competitors had dropped out. When from the east, 5 knots, Amy murmured, reading instruments that measured Mars' thin atmosphere. Temperature dropping. Jack made tiny adjustments and squeezed the trigger. Perfect hit. The final round placed the target at 2,000 meters, extreme even by Earth standards, and in Mars' different gravity and atmosphere, it required complex calculations. You've got this, Amy whispered. 2 clicks right to account for the valley wind. Jack took a deep breath, held it halfway, and fired. The bullet hit just slightly off-center. No other human came close. At the end of the day, Captain Howard announced, Jack Miller will represent humanity in the marksmanship competition. As Jack packed up his rifle, he noticed a slender figure watching from the shadows of a nearby building. Lily had been observing. She approached as the other humans dispersed. I watched your trials, she said without greeting. You shoot well, for a human. Thanks, Jack replied, continuing to clean his weapon. But you will fail in the competition, she continued. The final targets will be at distances no human has ever reached. Jack looked up at her. Have you ever wondered why humans joined the Confederation in the first place? Lily's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. Your species discovered faster than light travel and were invited, as all spacefaring races are. And how many other species developed FTL travel with only their own planet's resources? Lily hesitated. None. All received some guidance from existing members. Exactly, Jack said. Humans are good at doing what others say is impossible. For the first time, Lily seemed to consider him with genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. Your confidence is interesting, but misplaced. Vexillians have biological advantages you cannot overcome. My third eye can see heat signatures at 3 kilometers. We have no pulse to disrupt our aim. True, Jack agreed, but humans have something else. What? You'll see. Jack smiled and shouldered his rifle case. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack trained relentlessly. Each morning before dawn, he and Amy would head to the furthest range on the base. They worked with atmospheric data, wind patterns, and the peculiarities of Mars' lower gravity. Sometimes Jack caught glimpses of Lily watching from a distance, her silver skin barely visible against the Martian landscape. She never approached during training, but he could feel her 3-eyed gaze studying his every movement. She's trying to figure you out, Amy said one day as they packed up. Vexillians rely on their biology. They don't understand how humans compensate through technique and intuition. Jack nodded. That's our advantage. They don't think we can do it, so they're not really preparing for us. They're preparing for each other. The competition starts tomorrow. Amy reminded him. The Draconians and Arachne have some good shooters too. Jack looked toward the distant target, barely visible to human eyes. Good. The more everyone focuses on each other, the more we can surprise them. That night, as Jack cleaned his rifle one final time, a message appeared on his tablet. It was from Lily. Good luck tomorrow, human Jack. You will need it. He smiled to himself. Tomorrow would change everything. The day of the competition arrived with a dust storm that painted the Martian sky a deep orange. Competitors from all 12 species gathered at the largest firing range on the base. Each wore their own species' military uniform, creating a colorful display of Confederation diversity. Jack stood with Amy of the human section, his rifle case at his feet. From across the field, he saw Lily with 5 other Vexillians, their silver skin shimmering even in the dull light. She caught his eye and gave a small nod. Commander Bex's voice boomed through speakers. Welcome to the first Joint Species Marksmanship Competition. Today's event will test skill, precision, and adaptation to changing conditions. The commander explained the rules. The competition would happen in stages, with targets at increasing distances. After each round, the lowest scoring competitors would be eliminated until only 3 remained for the final challenge. First round, stationary targets at 1,000 meters, announced the range officer, a tall Olgorian like Commander Vex. This distance was considered warm-up by Confederation standards. All 36 competitors hit their targets, though with varying degrees of accuracy. Jack placed in the top 10, while Lily scored second overall. A large draconian named Kraz took first place. Not bad, human Jack, Lily said as they waited for the second round. But the real test begins now. The second round placed targets at 1,500 meters. The Martian wind had picked up, making adjustments necessary. 4 competitors missed completely and were eliminated. By the third round, at 2,000 meters, Jack felt his heart rate increase. This was pushing the limits of what humans could typically achieve, especially in Mars conditions. He lay on the firing platform, Amy beside him with her instruments. Wind shifting from northwest, 8 knots, she whispered. Temperature dropping 1 degree since last measurement. Jack made his calculations, adjusted his scope, and controlled his breathing. When he pulled the trigger, the rifle kicked against his shoulder. Through his scope, he saw his shot hit just slightly off-center. Good enough to advance, but not perfect. Lily, firing 2 stations down from him, hit dead center. Her 3 eyes moved independently as she shot. One on the scope, one on the wind flags, and one watching the target itself. It was an alien advantage no human could match. The competition continued through the afternoon. By the 6th round, with targets at 3,000 meters, only 10 competitors remained. Jack was the only human left, something that clearly surprised many of the aliens watching. How is the human still in? Jack overheard an Arachne ask another alien. Luck, came the reply. He will fall in the next round. The 7th round eliminated 4 more competitors, leaving only 6. Jack, Lily, Kraz the Draconian, 2 other Vexillians, and an Arachne whose 8 limbs helped stabilize its aim. As they prepared for the 8th round, Lily approached Jack at his station. Your persistence is remarkable, she said. Most humans would have failed by now. Most humans aren't me, Jack replied, checking his rifle. Lily's faceplates shifted slightly. You calculated that last shot. I watched you. Vexillians do not need such calculations. Different species, different methods, Jack said. Results are what matter. The 8th round targets were set at 3,500 meters, beyond what most humans could even see clearly, let alone hit. Jack relied entirely on Amy's readings and his scope's enhanced display. This is almost impossible, Amy muttered as she fed him data. Atmospheric density is fluctuating with the storm. Jack shut out all distractions. He adjusted for wind, gravity, temperature, and the subtle Coriolis effect of Mars rotation. When he fired, he held his breath until Amy confirmed through her spotting scope. Hit. Outer ring, but a solid hit. The two other Vexillians and the Arachne all missed at this extreme range. Only Jack, Lily, and Cross advanced to the final round. Commander Vex addressed the crowd. "We have our 3 finalists. Tomorrow's final challenge will test the very limits of marksmanship. Even for our most skilled shooters, it may well prove impossible." Jack caught Lily looking at him with all 3 of her eyes, her expression unreadable. "Tomorrow then, Human Jack," she said as she passed. "Your final chance to surprise me." "Count on it," he replied. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The dust storm had passed, leaving the Martian landscape sharply defined under a pale pink sky. The larger crowd had gathered to watch the final round, including high-ranking officers from the Confederation fleet who had arrived overnight. Jack arrived early, as usual. Amy walked beside him, carrying her spotting equipment. "You sleep okay?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Always do before a big shot." "This isn't just a big shot," Amy whispered. "No human has ever hit a target at the distance they're setting today. Not even you." Jack checked his rifle one last time. "Then today we make history." Commander Vex waited until all 3 finalists were in position before explaining the final challenge. "Today's test is unlike any before," the commander said, his voice carried across the range by speakers. "You will be shooting at moving targets at a distance of 4,500 meters. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even for Vexillians and Draconians, this was an extreme challenge. "The targets will move in random patterns," Commander Vex continued. "Wind conditions are currently steady but expected to change. You will each have 1 shot. Highest score wins." Cross, the Draconian, would shoot first, then Lily, and finally Jack. The order had been determined by their previous scores. Jack watched as Cross, massive and gray-skinned, took his position. The Draconian's rifle was twice the size of a human weapon, built to handle his species' tremendous strength. He spent nearly 10 minutes adjusting his position and aim before finally firing. The shot echoed across the Martian plain. Through his scope, Jack could see that Cross had hit the outer ring of the moving target. A good shot, but not perfect. Cross stomped away from the firing line, clearly disappointed. Wind shifted at the last second. He growled as he passed Jack. "Good luck, human. You'll need it." Now it was Lily's turn. She moved with fluid grace to the firing position, her silver skin catching the sunlight. Her 3 eyes worked in perfect coordination, one on her scope, one tracking the target's movement, and one monitoring the wind flags. The crowd grew silent as Lily took aim. Her species didn't need to control their breathing like humans did. Vexillians could hold perfectly still for hours if necessary. She waited, tracking the target's movement, then fired with perfect timing. The shot hit just slightly off-center, an excellent shot that would be nearly impossible to beat. Lily rose from her position, her face plates arranged in what Jack now recognized as a smile. She nodded to him as they passed. "A clean shot, Human Jack. Let us see if you can match it." Jack took his position at the firing line. The target looked tiny through his scope, a moving disc that seemed no bigger than a coin from this distance. Amy settled beside him with her spotting equipment. "Wind holding steady at 5 knots from the northwest," she reported. "Target moving in pattern 7. Temperature steady." Jack focused, shutting out the crowd and the pressure. This shot was at the very edge of human capability, even with the best equipment. "You've got this," Amy whispered, "just like we practiced." Jack tracked the target, feeling the rhythm of its movement. Unlike Lily, he had to work with his heartbeat, not against it. Years of training had taught him to fire between beats, in that fraction of a second when his body was most still. As he prepared to shoot, a sudden gust of wind swept across the range. The flags shifted direction. Wind changing. Amy hissed, now coming from the west at 8 knots. Jack made a split-second adjustment. This changed everything. The shot was now not just difficult, but bordered on impossible according to the ballistics tables. He heard murmurs from the crowd. They knew conditions had changed. They expected him to fail. Jack took a deep breath, calculated the new variables in his head, and adjusted his aim to a point that seemed wrong, far from where the target currently was. He would have to predict where it would be and how the wind would push his bullet. His finger tightened on the trigger. In that moment, Jack wasn't thinking about beating Lily or proving humans worthy. He was simply doing what he had trained years to do, make the impossible shot. The rifle fired. The sound of Jack's shot echoed across the Martian landscape. For a moment, everything was silent. Through his scope, Jack couldn't tell if he had hit the target or not. The distance was simply too great for human eyes, even with enhanced optics. Amy was hunched over her spotting scope, her body tense. Waiting for confirmation, she whispered. The range officer, using advanced alien technology to track the shots, took longer than usual to report the result. The crowd grew restless, murmuring among themselves. Jack remained in position, his breathing steady. Years of training had taught him patience. Finally, Commander Bex's voice came over the speakers. Target hit. Center ring. A gasp went through the crowd. Center ring meant Jack had outscored both Kraz and Lily. A human had just beaten the best shooters of two species renowned for their marksmanship. Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. Amy was grinning down at him. "You did it," she said. "Perfect shot." As Jack stood up, he saw Lily staring at him from across the range. All three of her eyes were wide open, fixed on him with an intensity he hadn't seen before. The range officer approached them with a data tablet. "We need to verify the shot," he explained. "The computer is showing unusual trajectory data." On the tablet was a diagram of Jack's bullet path. Instead of the expected straight line with minimal drop, the bullet had followed a curved path that accounted for both the wind and the target's movement. It had intercepted the target at precisely the right moment. "The bullet shouldn't have moved like this," the range officer said, clearly confused. "According to standard ballistics, this shot was impossible." Jack shrugged. "I adjusted for the wind change." "But this adjustment." The officer pointed to the diagram. "No shooter we've recorded has ever compensated this way." A group of officials gathered around the tablet, discussing the shot in hushed tones. Some were suggesting the equipment might have malfunctioned. Others wanted to check Jack's rifle for illegal modifications. Captain Howard, the human commander, stepped forward. "The rifle is standard issue with approved modifications," he said firmly. "And Miller has made shots like this before." Commander Vex studied the data carefully. "The shot is valid," he finally announced. "The human, Jack Miller, wins the final round." The human spectators erupted in cheers. The aliens looked stunned, particularly the Vexillians. As the crowd dispersed, Jack packed up his rifle. He felt satisfied but not surprised. The shot had been difficult, but not beyond his capabilities. He was about to leave when Lily approached him. Her silver skin seemed duller than usual, her posture less confident. "That shot," she said, "I watched it through my third eye. The bullet curved in a way that defies physics as we understand it." "Not human physics," Jack replied. "We've been dealing with wind and gravity all our history. We learned to work with them, not against them." Lily's faceplates shifted rapidly, showing her confusion. "But the calculations required, the timing. Even our best shooters couldn't have made that adjustment so quickly." Jack smiled slightly. "That's because you're relying too much on calculations. Sometimes you have to feel the shot." "Feel it?" Lily's third eye narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means that humans don't just use data. We use instinct, experience, what we call gut feeling. Sometimes we know things are right even when the numbers say they shouldn't be." Lily was silent for a long moment. "I would like to understand this concept better," she finally said. "Perhaps humans have more to teach than I realized." The sun was setting over the Martian horizon, casting long shadows across the range. Jack shouldered his rifle case. "The Confederation brought species together because we're all different," he said. "We all have something to learn from each other." Lily nodded slowly. I believed humans were limited by their biology. But today you've shown me that limitation can breed innovation. As they walked back toward the base together, Jack noticed other aliens watching them with new interest. The story of the humans' impossible shot was already spreading. Tomorrow, Lily said suddenly, would you show me how you make these gut-feeling calculations? Jack nodded. I'd be happy to try, though it's not something easily taught. It comes from experience. I have much experience, Lily replied, but perhaps not the right kind. For the first time since they'd met, Jack felt like they were talking as equals. The day after the competition, everyone on the base was talking about Jack's shot. Humans walked taller, receiving nods of respect from species that had previously ignored them. Jack found himself the center of attention, something he wasn't entirely comfortable with. There's a delegation of Confederation scientists that wants to interview you, Amy told him over breakfast in the mess hall. They're trying to understand how you made that shot. Jack sipped his coffee. Not much to tell. I adjusted for the conditions and took the shot. You know it's more than that, Amy said. The trajectory data is being studied by weapons experts from 6 different species. They're calling it the Miller Curve. Before Jack could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Lily stood there, along with 2 older Vexillians wearing the silver-trimmed uniforms of senior officers. Human Jack, Lily said formally, these are Elders Parsec and Nerilith of the Vexillian Science Guild. They wish to speak with you about your shot. Jack stood and nodded respectfully. I'd be happy to help, though I'm not sure how much science I can offer. The mess hall had a small meeting room off to one side. Inside, the Vexillian elders had set up equipment to display Jack's shot data in 3 dimensions. The holographic image showed the bullet's path as it curved line through space, intercepting the moving target at exactly the right moment. We have been studying marksmanship for 12 generations, Elder Parsec said, his 3 eyes fixed on Jack. Never have we seen a trajectory like this. Elder Nerilith pointed to a specific point in the hologram. Here, your bullet curved in a way that should not be possible at that velocity. Our physics models cannot explain it. Jack studied the image. The wind changed direction at the last second. I adjusted by aiming at where I felt the target would be, accounting for the new wind. Felt. Elder Parsec's faceplates shifted in confusion. Marksmanship is not about feelings. It is about precise calculations. For humans, it's both, Jack explained. We call it intuition. Experience teaches us things we can't always put into numbers. Lily, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. I watched the shot through my 3rd eye, she told the elders. Just before he fired, Miller did something no Vexillian would do. He aimed away from the target. The elders looked shocked. Away? Elder Nerilith asked. Yes, Lily continued. He aimed at empty space where nothing was. Yet somehow he knew the wind would curve the bullet and the target would move into its path. Jack remembered the moment clearly. It wasn't empty space to me. It was where everything would come together. The bullet, the wind, the target. I saw them all meeting at that point. The elders exchanged glances, their face plates moving in patterns Jack couldn't interpret. We would like to run a test, Elder Parsec finally said. Could you replicate this shot under controlled conditions? Jack nodded. I can try. They moved to the indoor range where environmental conditions could be precisely controlled. The elders set up a target at a shorter distance, but programmed wind simulators to create complex, shifting patterns much more difficult than the competition. Jack prepared his rifle while Lily stood nearby, watching his every move with all 3 of her eyes. You don't believe I can do it again, Jack said to her as he loaded a single round. I don't know what to believe anymore, Lily replied honestly. What you did defies everything I was taught. Jack took position at the firing line. The elders activated the wind simulators and set the target in motion. The patterns were random and changing rapidly, far more challenging than the competition had been. Jack took a deep breath and fell into that special mindset that had served him through hundreds of impossible shots. He felt the air currents, saw the patterns, and sensed where everything would align. When he pulled the trigger, he already knew the result. The bullet curved through the artificial wind patterns, following a path that looked wrong to everyone watching. It struck the moving target dead center. The room fell silent. Then Lily's voice, filled with something like wonder, broke the stillness. "Impossible," she exclaimed, the word echoing in the enclosed space. Jack turned to her with a small smile. "Impossible is what humans do best." For the first time, Lily's faceplates arranged into what appeared to be genuine respect. "I think I am beginning to understand," she said quietly. A week after the competition, life on the base had begun to return to normal. Jack no longer received as many curious stares when he walked through the corridors, though the respect remained. Humans had gained a new standing among the Confederation species. Jack was cleaning his rifle in the armory when Lily found him. She moved silently as always, appearing at his side without warning. "Human Jack," she greeted him. "Just Jack is fine," he replied, continuing his work. "How did your meeting with the Science Guild go?" After the controlled test, the Vexillian elders had returned to their ship to analyze the data. Lily had been asked to join them as she had witnessed both shots firsthand. "They have created 17 new theories to explain your shooting technique," she said, settling beside him. "None of them are correct." Jack smiled. "What's your theory?" Lily's faceplates shifted in what he now recognized as thoughtfulness. "I believe humans have developed something our species never needed to." "And what's that?" "Adaptability," she said simply. "Vexillians evolved with superior vision and steady bodies. We never needed to compensate for biological limitations. But humans," she paused. "Humans found ways to overcome their weaknesses, and in doing so, discovered strengths we never imagined." Jack set his rifle down and looked at her. "That's a pretty good theory." "I have a request," Lily said, her three eyes meeting his gaze. "I wish to learn from you." "Learn what?" "This gut feeling. This human intuition. The elders believe it is valuable." Jack laughed softly. "It's not something easily taught. It comes from experience, failure, adaptation. It's what happens when you push beyond what seems possible." "Then I wish to have those experiences," Lily said firmly. "I have requested transfer to the human combat unit. As your partner." Jack blinked in surprise. "My partner? But Vexillians usually work with other Vexillians." "Usually, yes. But the Confederation was formed to share knowledge between species. Until now, the Vexillians believed we had little to learn from humans." Her faceplates shifted to what might have been embarrassment. "I believe this as well. And now I understand that biology is only part of what makes a species strong. Philosophy, psychology, approach, these matter as much or more." Captain Howard entered the armory, carrying a data tablet. He nodded to Jack. "Miller, got your new assignment here. You're being transferred to the Joint Special Operations Unit." Jack stood up straight. "Special Operations. After your performance in the competition, the Confederation High Command is creating a new unit combining the best skills from different species." The captain glanced at Lily. "I see your new partner found you already." "You knew about this?" Jack asked Lily after the captain left. "I requested it yesterday. The elders supported my request." She tilted her head. "Unless you object." Jack considered this for a moment. Working with Lily would be challenging. She was still learning to respect humans, and he was still learning to understand Vexillians. But there was something appealing about the partnership. "I don't object," he said finally. "But if we're going to be partners, you need to understand something about humans." "What is that?" "We don't just adapt to overcome our limitations. We change the rules of the game entirely." Lily's faceplates shifted into what Jack now knew was her version of a smile. "This is what interests me most. Vexillians perfect the rules. Humans break them." The next morning, Jack and Lily reported to their new unit. 4 other species were represented, each bringing unique abilities. The commander, a veteran Ulgorian, explained their first mission, a reconnaissance operation on one of Jupiter's moons where atmospheric conditions would make normal targeting systems useless. "Any questions?" the commander asked after the briefing. Jack glanced at Lily, who gave him a slight nod. "Just one, sir," Jack said. "When do we start?" As they left the briefing room, Lily spoke quietly. "The conditions on that moon make accurate shooting impossible by Confederation standards." Jack smiled. "Then it's the perfect first mission for us. Because impossible is what humans do best." There was a hint of teasing in her voice. "No," Jack replied, "because now it's what we'll do best, together." For the first time, Jack heard what might have been a Vexillian laugh, a soft, melodic sound unlike the clicking he'd heard before. "I look forward to it, partner," Lily said. And Jack knew that something impossible had happened, not just the shot, but the understanding that had grown from it. A bridge between 2 species that had seemed too different to truly connect. Sometimes the most impossible things were the most important ones.